Hey Church, welcome to Knowing the Life YouTube channel. I'm so happy to introduce you this fantastic piece of work that deals with messianic prophecies from the Old Testament. And I would say this is one of the important books that you're supposed to have while you are reading your Bible. Why? Because if you're reading your Gospels, you will see that the authors of the Gospels saying that Jesus Christ fulfilled XYZ prophecies from the Old Testament. And even Jesus Christ says that there are lots of Old Testament prophecies that were prophesied about his coming, about his suffering, and about his death. So it is important for us to know how the messianic prophecies were prophesied in the Old Testament and how Jesus Christ fulfilled them. Oftentimes, when we read the messianic prophecies in the New Testament and try to get them from the Old Testament and understand how the Old Testament prophesied the coming of Jesus Christ, we might not be in a position to bridge the connection, because when we are reading the Old Testament passage within its own context, we might miss how that specific verse could act as a prophecy. For example, here if you look at this Matthew virgin birth prophecy, we know it is coming from Isaiah chapter number 7. If you open Isaiah chapter number 7 and try to understand what this scenario is at the time while Isaiah was giving this prophecy, um, it is going to be very difficult for us to understand this prophecy. I'll just give you the context. This was a time when Ahaz was fearing Syria and Israel. So Ahaz is the king of Judah, and Syria and Israel would want to wage a war against Assyria. However, they cannot do that alone, and they need the help of other nations as well, and that is the reason why they seek the help of Judah. However, Judah was not interested in joining those forces against Assyria. So that is where Syria and Israel would try to wage a war against Judah, that is Ahaz, and they wanted to get down Ahaz and install another king in the place of Ahaz. So Ahaz knows this news, and then he would want to be freed. So he makes an alliance with Assyria. So this was the time when Ahaz was really being trembled, and God sends Isaiah, and then Isaiah says to Ahaz not to fear. And of course, God gives a sign. So what was that sign? That sign is that virgin is going to give birth to a child, and by the time the child grows up and knows what is good and what is evil, the both kings would die. In other words, the king of Israel and the king of Syria would die, and Ahaz doesn't have to fear. So that boy is a sign for Ahaz. Now, the complexity here comes is if it is really talking about Jesus Christ. Because if it is really talking about Jesus Christ, then the next question would be how it is going to comfort Ahaz. Because this prophecy, if in case it is really talking about Jesus Christ, then it will be fulfilled 800 years or maybe 700 years after this prophecy is prophesied. Now, how it is going to comfort Ahaz if it is really talking about Jesus Christ? Now, if it is not about Jesus Christ, if it is talking about a random woman and a random child within the kingdom during the time period of Ahaz, then the next question would be how it is going to prophesy the coming of Jesus Christ. Now, this is where the tension comes in, and people come up with various other theories to just resolve that tension. So they come up with some notion like they come up with some kind of theories like it is a double fulfillment prophecy. So prophecy is fulfilled during the time of Ahaz, and this prophecy was also fulfilled in the life of Jesus Christ. There is another theory that says that partial fulfillment is fulfilled during the time of Ahaz, and the ultimate fulfillment happened in the life of Jesus Christ, which is great. I'm not against this. However, the problem is if you are living in the time of Isaiah or during the time of Ahaz and you see this prophecy being fulfilled, you wouldn't be anticipating a virgin to be giving birth to a child, because for you simply believe that the prophecy is already fulfilled and you do not expect that prophecy to be fulfilled once again 700 years later. Now that's a problem, because nowhere in the text it says that this prophecy that he is speaking has double fulfillment aspect or partial fulfillment and ultimate fulfillment aspect in this prophecy. That is where the tension comes in. So this is just one verse we're talking about, and this kind of tension actually makes people believe that this prophecy is not at all talking about the Messiah, and some even say that Matthew used some other way of interpreting the scriptures to just help them understand how Jesus Christ fulfilled this so-called prophecy. I mean, there are all kind of explanations. There are 7 or 8 ways to understand this prophecy. However, the best way is what I found in this book. So this book deals with all of those concepts. Like, this book believes that there are direct messianic prophecies in the Old Testament, and it tries to explain how those specific verses in the Old Testament is directly prophesying the coming of Jesus Christ and the suffering of Jesus Christ, death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and the second coming of Jesus Christ. Now, what is the explanation for that? Yeah, you need to buy this one. You need to read this book. Now, let us get into this. You might have understood why this book is really important, because this is really, really dealing with some important stuff that we Christians really hold on. So, to just give you a gist, there are lots and lots of passages here. So the introduction was written by Walter Kaiser, and if you do not know who Walter Kaiser is a person that wrote the biblical theology of Messiah in the Old Testament, and this was written like 25 years back, and it is a textbook of this concept. So, like, if at all you want to know something about this, then probably I would suggest you to read this one. It is much more smaller. This was written like 25 years back, and it is written by just a single person. However, this book which we see now, it is written by multiple scholars. So, and of course, it is going to be much more scholarly. So it's going to deal with much more, scholarly work. So, yeah, just to introduce you how this is going to be, you'll have a lot of passages here. You'll have a lot of essays here that help us understand the concept of Messiah during the time of the Old Testament and during the time of Second Temple literature. I mean, during the time of the 400 years of silent period. And of course, it talks about the New Testament understanding of these messianic prophecies, which are fulfilled in the life of Jesus Christ. Now, then once the articles are done, you will be beginning with the prophecies from Genesis. And it begins with Genesis, and then it ends with Malachi. So it deals with each and every book, and wherever they find a messianic verse, they try to help us understand how this messianic verse is pointing out to Jesus Christ. To just give you a gist about it, you will find in Genesis 3:15 God giving a promise to human beings. So you know that Satan brought sin into this world. It deceived human beings, because of which sin came into the world, because of which what is arranged in an orderly manner became disorderly. So God gave a promise while cursing serpent, stating that there will be a person that will be born to Eve that will reverse everything that Satan has done. So that promise is given in Genesis 3:15. And if you read this Genesis, you will find a lot of names that talk about lineage. And this is very important because Moses was writing the first 5 books. So he wants his readers to know the lineage of that promised seed. So if you look at this, to be very specific, in Genesis 3:15, you have a promised seed. Now, where do you find this promised seed? If you read the story further, you will see Eve saying that Seth is that promised seed. Now, that doesn't mean that Seth is really that promised seed. It simply means that the promised seed is coming through the line of Seth. Now, as you read further, you will find Noah coming from Seth lineage. And Noah has 3 children again. And again, through which lineage the promised seed is going to come? Well, Noah blesses Shem. And the blessing that Noah gives to Shem is that God is going to live in the tents of Shem. Now, as you read further, you will find Abraham coming from the lineage of Shem. And of course, you know the covenant that God makes with Abraham. Through Abraham, he's going to bless the entire nations, all the world. So as you proceed ahead, of course, Abraham has 2 children. One is Isaac, the other one is Ishmael, and Abraham passes his promise to Isaac. And of course, Isaac has Jacob, so he promises the very same promise to Jacob. And of course, Jacob has 12 children. Now, which lineage do we need to see? Well, that is where God promises to Judah that until Shiloh comes, there will be kings coming through the lineage of Judah, that you will be finding here in Genesis 49:8-12. As you proceed ahead with the story that Moses was writing, Moses, through the end of his life, he says that there is going to be a prophet that will be just like Moses. And you can find that here in Deuteronomy 18:15-19. Now, this is what the entire Pentateuch says. Moses was writing this Pentateuch so that the readers will connect all of these dots. They would find out this lineage and wait for that promised Messiah to come through the lineage of Judah. And he is going to be like Moses. Now, what makes Moses so special is that he has a very great relationship with God. With other prophets, God spoke in riddles. But again, when it comes to Moses, he spoke very clearly, and that is the specialty that Moses has. So, by the time we end the Pentateuch, we know that there are two things that we need to keep in mind. One, the person that God promised is going to come through the lineage of Judah, and second, he's going to be like Moses. He's going to do miracles, and he is going to have close relationship with God. And yes, we'll have to search. Now, as the story progresses, we'll find that David came from the line of Judah. So David would get another promise in 2nd chapter, 7th chapter, where God says that the throne of David will remain forever. Now, how it will remain forever, you'll have to read Chronicles, and if you read Chronicles 17th chapter, you will see that there will be an individual person that would come through the line of David who will be reigning forever. Now, this is exactly what the previous prophecy said in the book of, in Pentateuch, where the prophecy says that until Shiloh comes, there will be kings coming up through the line of Judah. So that is what happening here. So once this individual person promised in 1 Chronicles 17 comes, there will be no other king because he will be the king forever. Now, how that can really happen? That question would be answered in the book of Psalms, because in the book of Psalms you see the divine Son of God ruling forever, and also all the kings on the earth would pay homage to him. They worship him, they glorify him, and they would be worshipping him. And it is not just seen in Psalms chapter number 2, it is also found in Psalms 72 chapter. Now here we find a divine Son of God reigning forever because he doesn't have any death. Now we also saw that in 1 Chronicles 17 that there will be a single individual coming through the line of David who will be reigning forever. Now if it is just a mere human being, he will not be able to reign forever because he will die, and then that throne will be passed to the next person. That individual person to reign forever, that person should not be a human being, or at least he should not be a mere human being. He should be God. And that is what Isaiah says. Isaiah says that God will be born in the form of a child. Yeah, Isaiah actually gets these two concepts into a single thread, and then he unifies them and prophesies about the coming of the Messiah. That is what you would find here, because Isaiah knows that there is a Davidic covenant and there will be a king that will be ruling forever. And he also read the Psalms, he knows that only God can do that. So God revealed the same thing to Isaiah to prophesy this, and that is why you will find in Isaiah chapter number 9, Isaiah saying that there will be God that will be born in the form of a son, and he would be called Wonderful Counselor. He will be called Eternal Father, and you know all of that prophecy. So that is how it is going to happen. Now Isaiah doesn't know when he is going to come. Well, that is where Daniel comes into picture. Daniel says in chapter number, if you read Daniel chapter number 7 and 9, you would know that Daniel saying that, and we'll have to calculate 490 years from the time of Ezra, and whatever that day is, whatever that year is, that is the year that is going to be the birth year of that promised person. And of course, if you see that, it would be coming close to 3 BC or 4 BC or something like that, which is going to be the time that Jesus Christ was born. So that is where the book of Micah says that the person would be born in Bethlehem. And we also do not know why he would be born. And that is where Daniel chapter number 9 says that he would die. And that is what exactly even Isaiah 53 chapter also says, that the promised person that will be coming, he would be dying. And this is a question, if he dies, what is going to happen next? Well, that is what Zechariah says. Zechariah says a story of a shepherd. The shepherd would come to his own people, and then his own people would reject him when he comes first. So he leaves, and then he comes again, and that is when people would be accepting that the shepherd. So having this context in mind, what Zechariah was saying is, when that promised seed comes to Israel, Israel would be denying that individual. They would be killing. And because the individual person dies, the entire nation would be blessed through him. But again, he's gonna come once again, and that is when Israel will be saved. I mean, if you look at all of this, you just try to integrate all of these prophecies. Hey, the person should come from David, from the line of David, and then he should be ruling forever, and he should die. He should be God, and he should be born as a man. He should be born to a virgin, and then he should die. And through his death, all the nations would be blessed, which is exactly what was promised to Abraham. He would be resurrected, and then he would be coming again. And once he comes, all the rest of the Israel would be saved. Is this not pointing out to someone who we know? Well, I feel it is Jesus, and I believe it is Jesus. Now, this book actually goes. I did not actually survey all the messianic prophecies. You see me skipping a lot of prophecies, but I think you can get a fair understanding on how this book is dealing with all of these prophecies. It is just to give an introduction on how messianic prophecies were there in the Old Testament and how they would be pointing to Jesus Christ. But again, while you're reading the Old Testament prophecies, you would be getting a lot of questions. And to deal with all of those questions, you have these scholars who wrote all of these articles who would be coming up with some great arguments, and they're going to go in depth, and they're going to talk about Hebrew, they're going to talk about the culture, they're going to talk about a lot of other factors that can help us understand the Old Testament messianic prophecies. Just read these verses. You would be amazed to see how Jesus Christ fulfilled all of these prophecies. Look at all of these beautiful prophecies, and you would be amazed. It is just overwhelming. It is so big. It is so thick. It comes with a lot of bibliography. It comes with a lot of notes, a lot of references. If you want to go deeper, you can just dig deeper and then just learn as much as possible. I just want to show you what the articles are. The foreword was written by Walter Kaiser, and I also showed what the book that he wrote. And then as we proceed ahead, you will find who the contributors are. And then as we go even further, we will find the acknowledgements and then the list of abbreviations, great, and then introduction. And the introduction is given by Michael Riddlenick, if I'm not wrong. Michael Riddlenick wrote a fantastic book called The Messianic Hope, which is one of my favorites. I would suggest you to get that one as well. And then you find the articles related to the Messiah, the Messiah and his titles. Great. You see what the titles are: the Son of God, the Son of Man, Prophet like Moses, the Son of David, the Teacher, the Servant of Lord, Emmanuel, Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Father of Eternity, Prince of Peace, the Branch of Lord, the Lord of our righteousness, the One Shepherd, the Light of Nations. Wow. Messiah and the Hebrew Bible, you have another article written by John Sailhammer, and I would suggest you to read John Sailhammer as well, because he comes up with an approach called canonical approach, which is one of my favorites. I'm not a great fan of historical grammatical method, because I believe that historical grammatical method has its own limitations, but I think canonical approach would actually get us to know the mind of God, which historical grammatical method cannot do, because it is beyond the scope of historical grammatical method. Well, as we go through this, Messiah and textual criticism and messianic prophecy, great. You can read this article. I think some of these you will be finding in his other book called The Messianic Hope as well. And then interpretive approaches to messianic prophecy, because this lays down a lot of background for you. So I would suggest you to just go through this article as well. And then we have, sorry, it is taking so much of time, the Old Testament in the Old Testament. How the Old Testament interprets the Old Testament. Great. If you want to purchase that book, there is another book by the name of the very same title, if I'm not wrong, The Old Testament Use of Old Testament, which is really good. So the Old Testament and the New Testament, how the apostles understood the Old Testament prophecies, and how they were able to use all of these Old Testament prophecies to Jesus Christ. What is the methodology that they used? Great article. Would suggest you to read that. And then canonical perspectives on the Messianic prophecy. I didn't read this, but I would encourage you to purchase this book and read this, or else if I read, then probably if I'm interested, then probably I'm gonna make another video. So Messiah, the prophet, priest, and king, how the Messiah is going to fulfill all of these roles. And then you have the deity of Messiah in the Old Testament. I already told you, I just gave you a gist. about Psalms. Maybe you can go through that. And then you have typology in the Old Testament. So, which is great, when I read the word typology, I just remember Mary. That is how usually Catholics make a lot of doctrines out of typology. In the name of typology, they come up with a lot of things. I'm not a great fan of that kind of typology, but I really love this typology, what is being discussed here in this article. And then you will know the sacrifice in the Old Testament. And you know where it is going? It is going to say that the ultimate sacrifice is Jesus Christ. And then you will find the messianic understanding in the intertestamental period. That is during the 400 years of silent period. And yes, and then Messiah in the rabbinic literature. And you know Michael Brown. Michael Brown has a show called A Line of Fire on YouTube. I would recommend his channel as well. He's a Jew, but then he became a Christian. Yes, you have Targums, which are Jewish, scriptures. I don't say scriptures, but again, Jewish books. So, what does the Targums have to say about the Messiah? Great. So, they are going 360 degrees, and they're trying to get as much information as possible uh, to just show that Jesus Christ is that prophesied Messiah of the Old Testament. And you have how Messiah is understood in the medieval Jewish literature as well. I'm not so fan of this medieval literature, but again, here we came with the scriptures. We are beginning our journey with Genesis 3:15, and we will end with Malachi. Great, I think with Malachi we'll end this subject. By the time you get to this place, I would expect that you would be convinced that Jesus Christ is that promised Messiah, and he fulfilled this, the Old Testament prophecies. The only thing is how he fulfilled those prophecies, and how we can understand that those Old Testament prophecies are really prophesying about the coming of Jesus Christ. So it is not just important to know what those Old Testament prophecies are. It is also important for us to know where they are really messianic prophecies in the Old Testament. If they are really the messianic prophecies, how can you say that they are really messianic prophecies? If they are really messianic prophecies, how can you say that they are fulfilled in the life of Jesus Christ? Now, there are a lot of other complicated questions that we need to deal, and we'll be able to deal with all of those if you get a fair understanding of the Old Testament scriptures, if you get a fair understanding on how the authors in the Old Testament functioned, and how the authors in the New Testament interpreted the Old Testament, and all of that background knowledge, which this book would be providing you all of that. So I would highly encourage you to get a hands-on experience with this book, because I don't see a lot of reviews coming on this book. I feel this is a very important book. Even though English is not my first language, I took this opportunity to introduce you this book, because I want this message to be known to the entire world. I want the people to know that this kind of a book is existing. That is what I want to say. If at all it is possible for you to get this book, I would suggest you to get this one as well. The combination of both of these books would really make the concept so good. It really makes you to understand very easily. This is much more concise version. You wouldn't find a lot of details that you would be finding here. But again, it is just written by a single man, and it is written by multiple scholars. And you see that, you saw that already, you know that. Yeah, and I highly encourage you to get this one. Yeah, that's all.